Hello, everybody. Welcome to Resilience Plus Rise, the podcast where we transform adversity into triumph, illuminate the extraordinary potential within all of us. I am your host, Thomas Scaria, a resilience coach, a ultra marathoner, and a firm believer in your next most powerful chapter. This podcast is a companion to my upcoming book, Resilience Plus Rise 26.2 Transformative Miles to Unleash Your Marathon of Life Mindset. Coming up in a month, maybe. Here, we amplify stories of hope, perseverance, and success to inspire your journey. Today's guest, I was thinking about a title, a very dynamic title, but what caught me was a pretty straightforward title: From the Streets to the World Stage. Our guest today, she's securing the FIFA, that is the soccer, World Football 2026 for the Americas with a legacy of unwavering leadership based on her resilience. She is a visionary leader in law enforcement and global events. I would love to introduce you to Sasha Larkin. Sasha, welcome to the show of Resilience Plus Rise.
Thank you. And first of all, that title is my favorite because I think, and I don't know if you did it on purpose, but those two words really have to coexist because the whole meaning to me and the essence of the word resilience is to rise, right? You always see it depicted as the phoenix, right? The phoenix coming
Yes,
through that fire, even a lotus, right? I mean, something I know that you are probably very familiar with is that
it comes from
beautiful
the mud.
lotus
It
coming
comes
through
from,
the mud. Yeah, it's
yes,
incredible. I think I've felt that 1,000 times in my life where I thought, man, in the depths of adversity, I know that I'm going to come through this mud pile better, shinier, more resilient. So I love that you put those two words together.
beautiful. And this actually is a beautiful segue into a simple question. Sasha, who are you? Or
Uh,
what made you who you are at this point of time?
well, I think to answer your first question, the who is warrior of light. I don't know if you ever read that book, and I'm for some reason dropping the author out of my head, but he actually calls himself the warrior of light, and he goes on to give. He wrote The Alchemist, and then he wrote another book.
Coelho.
Thank,
Okay.
thank you. And
Yeah.
then he wrote a book called Warrior of Light,
Okay.
and really talks about that journey of moving through despair and the depths of trauma and all of those things that I think as human nature, our first inclination is to think it's insurmountable. But one of the first lessons they teach us in the police academy is the difference between survivors and those that die in tragic events is mindset a lot of times. Now, granted, there's always the unsurvivable injury, right? A headshot to the brain or something that really just puts you lights out immediately. But they've done study after study that show that police officers that were killed in the line of duty, that were maybe shot in the arm or shot in the leg, an injury that was not, shouldn't have been life threatening. Maybe in that moment, their mindset was, I'm dying, right? And we hear them on the radio say, send help, I'm dying. Well, the difference is other cops or even suspects get shot 10, 15, 20 times, and they have the mindset of, not today, not today, right? This is not my day. And that mindset pulls them through that tragic event. And I remember in 1998 being a young cop thinking, it will not be my day, not today, right? And that was always the mindset that I had as far as survival. And it never occurred to me otherwise, which was probably a blessing and a curse because as a young police officer, I remember operating with minimal to no fear. I didn't have kids. I didn't have a death wish, but I just didn't have that fear because I believed in my training, I believed in my mindset, and I believed in the folks I was working with. So it was an interesting place to exist in where I do believe other people have that mindset of trepidation and fear. So that to me is the key component of resilience. Look, not every day was great, but I was grateful for every day,
Beautiful.
right?
Why police?
Why? To me, it was how could I not? Uh, I did not come from a family of law enforcement, but at the age of 3, people always laugh when I tell the story, but it's the honest to God's truth. It was the 70s. We had those old school TVs with the wire hanger antennas.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I think we got 2 or 3 channels, of which my mom never let me watch TV. But on Wednesday nights, she was taking a continuing ed class. And so I would sneak in and watch TV. And Chips, California Highway Patrol show with Larry Wilcox and Eric Estrada would come on. And I just couldn't believe that this was a job. I could not believe that people got paid to ride around on their motorcycles, look cool, and save lives. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do. And I
Okay.
never wanted to do anything else. That was it. And now the irony of the story is I never rode a motorcycle. I tried. I took the class at the community college and epically failed. Could not keep that thing upright. So I never did ride a motorcycle, but I did everything
But okay, on a segue, I would say that you would be wonderful on riding on a motorcycle, right?
else.
Okay, so you got into it.
Yeah.
Also, there were some elements which you mentioned about adversities, you getting shot. So, what was happening during that time? And also, there was something which was very profound, wherein you mentioned one of the elements that I mentioned, I realized in this conversation was about the mindset, whether it was a kid who was watching Chips,
Mm.
wherein mindset was the thought what worked around, or it was the mindset of a young rookie who got shot and said, "Not today."
Well, 2 things. One, let me be clear. I was in 2 different officer involved shootings, but by the grace of God was never shot. I unfortunately had
Okay.
to pull the trigger on somebody else, but gratefully never was injured. So, to answer your first question, I think it's really important. I think resilience and mindset starts in our childhood. I was raised by a single mother, and I will tell you that she's 4'11" and just full of piss and vinegar. To this day, she's 80 something and still working full time. She runs an urgent care clinic. She ballroom dances 6 nights a week, Argentinian tango and country, competes internationally. Like she is hell on wheels. She looks a little bit like Joan Rivers, this flawless skin and big hair. And the one thing I will tell you is she never told me I couldn't. Like I never had a mindset that I couldn't do something because she never told me that anything was impossible. So as a child, I believed I could do anything. And that includes, when I got into the police academy, and maybe almost to my deficit because it didn't occur to me that I was any different than the boys standing next to me. It just didn't. And back in the late 90s, they still believed that women had fought so hard for equal rights. And they told us this the first day of the academy. They said, hey, you guys fought so hard for your equal rights. Well, guess what? Good news is you have them here. And I remember thinking, great, I made the right choice. And they said, however, you will succumb to equal standards. I'm like, that's cool. I can do just as many
Okay.
push-ups. I can run just as fast. And they said, oh, no, no, no. You see, in a class of 120, there's 120 folks in my academy class. 6 of us were women. And they said, listen, you 6 will have the same standards. We're like, okay, cool. And they said, and that includes grooming standards. And I was thinking, well, what? We got to shower every day. I don't have to shave. We're good. They're like, no, no, no. You will shave your head just like the guys. And you can't tell today because I have it up, but my hair hits my natural waist. And it did
Wow.
then as well. Because you have to remember, I made the transition from being a Las Vegas showgirl to going into the police academy. So I had very long hair, very feminine.
Okay, okay, okay. See, so one of the things which I usually do on my podcast is that I just skim through the surface of the
Yeah, you didn't
personality.
see that on LinkedIn, huh?
No, so I just skim through it and I allow the aura or the presence of the person to take through. Okay, so you are a showgirl who got into. Okay,
The
then
yin and the yang, right?
I lose words, and this is one of those moments. Sorry, guys. So, from showgirl to cops. Okay,
Yeah.
tell me about that.
Well, so they made us shave our heads on the first day of the police academy,
How was
and
that?
traumatizing, honestly. But I remember thinking as I was tears rolling down my face, went home, and the guy that I was dating broke up with me and said I was an
Because you
embarrassment.
cut your hair.
Yeah. And what's
Okay.
interesting was he was a retired police officer, and I remember thinking that of all the people he would understand.
Hmm.
But it was okay, right? It was okay. It just meant that our paths had had gone separate ways, and that was okay. Um, I remember thinking I called my mom, very upset, and she said, "Sasha, you have to reframe the way you're looking at this." And I said, "Okay." She said, "Look, in this moment, you can't go back to being a showgirl. You don't have another job, and you've wanted this job since you were 3 years old. You have to think about the fact that there's nothing now that they can do to make you quit. Nothing. They can yell and scream and rant and rave because that's the whole game, right? To build resilience, again, to your point, in the academy, because they know very well that once we got on the streets, people were going to yell and scream at us. So they almost want to inoculate you to the fact that people will treat you that way." So I
Okay.
remember thinking, damn, she's right. There's nothing they can do to make me quit. I have no hair. I have no boyfriend. I'm in. I'm all in. And so that was really my mindset that over the next 6 months, I was completely immersed in what it was that they were trying to teach me because I knew I needed to learn it. And I knew I needed to learn it at a higher standard because, it was still the wild, wild west, Las Vegas in the late 90s. We were still riding the anti-police sentiment of Rodney King, because remember, that was just barely in the rearview mirror. Police
Hmm.
were not looked upon in a favorable light. And Vegas during that time was still really in its growth spurt. We were one of the fastest growing cities in the nation. People were moving there in droves, but we were also getting a lot of criminal activity on the rise. Homicides were on the rise, carjackings, a lot of things that happened in the late 90s. We still had the remnants of what people believe to be the organized crime influence, the mob influence, but
Hmm.
we'd really moved away from that, and we were starting to experience LA and Oakland-based crimes, gang-related crimes, and things like that. So it was a real span of growth and diversity and change, but we were not favorable. Uh, you know, the pendulum didn't start to swing the other way, unfortunately, until after 9/11, when people looked at police as heroes after what happened in New York. So it really was a dynamic time to be in policing, but it was a great time for me to join because I didn't know any different, right? I knew that I had to work a little bit harder to earn my way,
Okay.
and I didn't mind. I didn't mind at all. I enjoyed the camaraderie. I enjoyed putting that work in, and it was my whole existence during that time.
So, when you were mentioning about LA, you were the. In fact, I remember talking to Alan, and you were the first female assistant sheriff.
That's true.
As
So, in full disclosure, two of us got promoted on the same day, two females. So, I guess you could say we were both the first, which was pretty cool. It was really an interesting time for us because, for so long, nobody had ever broken that glass ceiling. And it really, for me, was not about ego. It was really about paving the road for those ladies coming behind me that really believed they couldn't,
mhm,
and just being able to look back and grab them by the hand and say, of course you can, because there's still places on our organization that women haven't gone, and this is 2025. And so really just the chance to
exactly.
do that for them is exciting. And I think in the next 10 years it won't be I was the first, this was the first. It will be common practice and commonplace for women to serve in all of these different roles without it being strange or admirable. And I never wanted it to be admirable. I just wanted it to be a way to pave the road for those women coming behind me, because there was very few women in front of me. There was two or three. My mentor, Kathy O'Connor, was the very first female deputy chief that paved the road for all of us. And she created the only female mentorship group we ever had on our organization, the Women of Metro, which I was honored to be able to take over and build. And it didn't promote women; it encouraged and supported them, and it took them out into the community to show the public that we made up the community that they represent. Right? We were women of all color, all sexual orientation, all religions. One of the women that took over for me is Muslim from Pakistan. She's an extraordinary human. The other one is a part of the LGBT community, and really we are. The other one is LDS, and it's fun because we show up places and the community can really relate. We're mothers, we're sisters, we're people that are trying to balance or navigate both families and a career. And we're very honest when we go out in the community and talk about it. Some days we epically fail. Like today, my alarm didn't go off. I barely got my three children to all have pants on and some sort of protein in their body before I hurried them off to school. But we made it. Wasn't pretty, but we made it. And the story of the resilience piece of that is some days it's easier than others. I don't agree that it's ever balanced. People always say, oh, I try to balance work and home. I don't agree with that. It's never going to be balanced.
No,
Never. You have to
for
have boundaries for both.
not really boundaries, because Sasha, I always believe is that when we talk about work-life balance, I say that's very much a misnomer, because
Yeah.
work is a subset of life.
Yes.
But
Agreed.
unfortunately, we make work larger than life,
It's true.
and we take that as what controls us. But there are a couple of questions which comes up. Number one, especially with the element that you mentioned about life happens, getting the kids ready. But when I look at it, wow, I'm just talking to the leader of counterintelligence for FIFA, the leadership, the attributes, and that's when you say about the balance, being mindful. But before that, what I wanted to ask you was, uh, you were a lady in very much a male-dominated arena. You also mentioned the word adversities and the challenges. So, if it is not shaking up the pond a lot, what were the adversities that you faced? Maybe not from the discrimination point of view, but for you to grow as a human. I'm not talking
Mm,
about the role or anything, but as a human, or because one of the elements which has been coming up constantly in the conversation from you is the resilience. So, what I believe about resilience is, or the purpose is, from our deepest of pain comes the deepest of our
mm.
purposes.
Yeah.
And the same thing is that from the deepest of our wounds shines the light.
Yeah. I
So,
believe that's a famous Rumi quote, right?
Rumi
From
quote,
the,
yes,
yes.
yes, yeah.
Yes. As a matter of fact, that's one of my daughter's names because I fell in love with the way he looked at resilience and spirit and God. And he's right, like through the greatest cracks, and I can't remember exactly how it is, but through the greatest cracks shines the
Yeah,
lights.
yeah, shines. So what he says is that I've paraphrased it is that in our deepest of wounds shines the light
That's
that
right.
goes
That's right.
inside.
Yeah.
So that's where it says, yeah.
It's funny because I think we face these adversities on different levels.
Mm.
I think in the beginning for me, and probably for any young first responder, fire, medical, doctors, anyone that has to see death. Death is a really interesting thing to process. And I've probably seen hundreds, if not thousands, of dead bodies in my career. Some of them died right in front of me, some of them died in my hands. I was the incident commander at the Mandalay Bay mass shooting. We call it the Route 91 1 October incident.
Yes.
And it's almost like your brain processes it on a whole different level of understanding because it's really not normal for the human mind to be able to see that much tragedy at one time. And I think that the biggest thing I can offer your listeners or anyone for that matter, and I really tried to embed it in my children, we can't avoid death. People around us, unfortunately, are going to lose their lives naturally or through tragedy. The biggest thing we have to have is an assimilative process and power, and it is a power because I'll give you a great example. Digestion is a form of assimilation, right? The digestion of our food.
True.
And I remember my yoga teacher teaching us one day that raw food diets were getting a whole lot of press. Everybody was doing raw food. The truth is, it takes a lot of fire, digestive fire, to digest raw food. And people that do raw food diets spend an extraordinary amount of energy and fire doing digestion. If they're not doing practices to rebuild that fire, reignite it, and keep it strong constantly, they will suffer, right? And it could be something simple as gas, indigestion,
Hmm.
just not really getting all the nutrients out of the food that you need. The same thing is true in emotion and trauma. If we're not doing things to increase our assimilative power and digestion of trauma and negative emotions, they will build up in our body. And in cops, what we see most of the time is that's where cops turn to alcohol or drugs or pornography or gambling or some sort of vice that quails that pain and that sensation. And look, living in the heart of all of those vices in Las Vegas, we saw it all too often. I lost a handful of really good friends that were cops to drug addictions, pain pill
Oh,
overdoses. And let's not even start to talk about suicide. You know, suicide is one of the leading causes of death for police officers. As a matter of fact, the last 5 years, we've lost more cops to suicide than we have to car accidents, heart attacks, and COVID, and in the line of death shootings put together.
wow. Okay.
Yes, it's extraordinary. So if you just think about the suffering that is going on a daily basis, you know, I always tell my kids, everybody around you in your classroom is going through something you know nothing about, right? I mean, the pain we're all carrying around on some level. Everybody's going through something. And that's why when somebody flips me off in traffic or yells at me, I just wave because they're going through something that I don't know anything about. And that flip off is not about me. It's about the fact that they're probably late to work. They got in a fight with their spouse. They just found out their mom has cancer. I'm not going to reflip them off. You know, everybody is suffering and struggling. And let me also add, I don't think suffering is bad. To me, suffering is not a negative word. I think it's important and I think it builds grit and resilience. So my son actually right now is grounded from his computer. And if you want to talk about true suffering for a 14-year-old, he can't imagine that his life is going to go on. But I told him, you are suffering, you're paying the consequences, but I want you to feel that now rather than when you're 18 and you make a bonehead decision and you suffer behind bars or injured in a hospital. You know, if we don't teach them that ability to suffer and feel pain and consequence now, they will feel it worse later, right?
Wow. That's beautiful. Let's get into the current role that you're on. I won't dwell into what that role entitles, but what I will ask you is that what were the attributes that allowed you to reach this
Mm,
role of leadership? And guys, if she's the head of the counterintelligence for the FIFA World Cup, 48 countries, if I'm not mistaken, around
that's
US,
correct.
Canada, and Mexico also.
That's correct.
So she's the head of it. So what I want to know is that what were the life learnings that you could
Mm,
attribute to that made you Sasha Larkin that people will turn back and say, okay, boss, what next?
passion, tenacity, and courage. And I don't mean courage as into running into gunfire. I mean courage as into trying things that could fail and doing it anyway. You know, I will tell you that I've built many programs that still live on the police department, but I
Hmm.
tried many more that failed. And I remember, I remember at a time uh, before COVID, maybe 2017, 2018, we were trying to decrease recidivism in the jail population because we were seeing so many people get arrested, go to jail, come out, and we were seeing the cycle repeat. And then worse, I'd been in policing long enough, we were starting to arrest offenders children's children.
Okay.
And so we were trying to figure out, how do we break that cycle? That we got to be missing something. So I remember I told my boss, I said, and I think I was a captain or a lieutenant at the time, and I said, hey, I want to build a program in the jails. I think we're missing our mark in the jail. Because if you think about it, we have 3 times, even as a parent or anything else, we have 3 times to intervene in somebody's life. Number one, before they get involved in a life of crime, right? Those
Hmm.
are like the DARE program at schools. It is anytime that we get a chance to work with churches or community centers or any place that touches children. Before people get into a life of crime, we have a chance to influence them and redirect them in a different way.
Hmm.
Number two, once they're involved in a life of crime, we have a chance to intervene and get them out. Those are like rehabilitation programs. Those are like redirectional programs. That's like de-radicalization programs. Anything that gives them lifelines to get out. Sometimes it's even incarceration, brief incarceration. The last one is when they're incarcerated, maybe for a long sentence, a life sentence, something that's going to be 20 years. How do we change their mindsets and beliefs and give them a different set of skills that they would never otherwise get? So I convinced my boss, probably because he was only half listening and just kind of let me go do my thing because he didn't want to be bothered to listen to all my harebrained ideas. I said, I want to build a yoga program, a nutrition program, and a parenting program in the jail for for guys that are being sentenced to the worst crimes, murder, rape, robbery. There's no they're already sentenced, so they're awaiting, they've already been convicted, but they're awaiting sentencing before they go to prison. So they're in the county jail where we actually had control of it. And I said, I want to go in and I want to teach them these things. I'm going to bring in outside instructors that they can relate to. So my lifelong friend, Dre Gardner, he's an African American male. We've known each other close to 30 years. And I was his first yoga teacher. And I watched this man transform in front of my eyes. He grew up a very, very hard life in Southern California, and maybe didn't run with the best people when he was young. But this man has got to be one of the most inspiring, just moving men you'll ever meet. He's got tattoos, really dark skinned, but he gets it. Like, he shines a light from the inside of him that is undeniable. So I called him up and I said, hey, I can't pay you anything. It's going to be on your own time, and I need you to come teach yoga in the jail to 72 prisoners that are the worst of the worst. They're getting ready to go to prison, but they're going to be in jail for probably anywhere between another 6 months and 6 years, depending on how long their trial gets drawn out. He said, I'm in. And we had another good friend, his name is Shane Stewart. He runs a nutrition and juice shop. I said, I want you to come teach them nutrition, because I promise you they have no idea the benefits of nutrition. And then I brought in my partner in crime at work. His name is Braden Schrag. He's a lieutenant now in Metro. And I said, I need you to teach parenting. He's like, done. So the three of these guys went in and taught nutrition, yoga, and parenting to these offenders. And after the first 32 weeks, we did surveys. And I would say 98% of them said, I can't touch my toes and I can't put my foot behind my head. But dang, had I had the understanding of what taking a deep breath before reacting means, I wouldn't be here. Mic drop for me. I told my boss, and let me tell you something, my bosses laughed. My peers told me I was insane. They told me it was BS. They told me it was the dumbest thing. They hated me for it. As a matter of fact, the other guys in the jail said, inmates don't deserve this. This isn't fair. They wouldn't even talk to me when I walked into the jail. But I just believed in my heart that it was the right thing to do. So this is a long-winded way of telling you that this is the courage I'm talking about. I knew it wasn't going to please everyone, but I also knew that there was such a deep need to show that not everybody gets access to this information and these skills in the normal flow of their life. And if we could go in there and change them just a little, then we were breaking the chance of somebody getting out and influencing their children. We were breaking recidivism for their families, if anything else. And so how did I end up here? It's because of courage, passion, and resilience.
Wow. Just being mindful of the time. I know the next question might open up a can of worms because my question is, what suggestions would you ask? Just one or two, because just again being mindful, because I know that you got a meeting coming up shortly. What suggestions would you put out to the listeners? For me, it is again the power of one. If one person also listens to it, and if they can feel a vibration within, what would you suggest them that they should be looking towards to be done to make their life or to be more human?
I think vulnerability is a strength, and it took me a long time to get there. It really did. Look, I grew up in an age of policing where we didn't ask for help. We didn't seek counseling or therapy. We just sucked it up and went on to the next call. And it hasn't been until probably the last 6 to 8 years that I've started to understand the power of vulnerability in relationships, right? In my marriage, with my children, being able to look at my children and say, Mommy made a big mistake. I'm sorry. Like this morning, I had to get up and say, Mommy messed up. My alarm didn't go off, right? That was on me, rather than trying to slough it off. And I think vulnerability is also at work, being able to look at my team and go, I have no idea how to fix this, or let's figure this out
Wow.
together, right? And I'm not afraid to not have all the answers. I think that's what empowers other people around us, is that we get to work through it together. And I'll tell you, I learned that lesson. I had a boss. He was a lieutenant when I was a sergeant. His name was Ted Snodgrass. And to this day, he's still my mentor and guide. But the very first day I started working for him, back then, like, I was at the height of my people pleasing. Like, I really wanted him to like me, and I really wanted to be, the best sergeant. And I walked into his office, full of, I'm pretty cheery and bubbly. I walked in, And he was an older, kind of crotchety, gray hair, glasses. He took his glasses down. He looked at me and he said, "Huh, what do you want?" I said, "Oh, nothing, sir. I'm just coming to introduce myself." And he said, "Get out." I was like, "Oh, okay."
Wow. Okay.
So I walked out, and then I went in the next day, and he said, "You're back." I said, "Well, yeah, I work here." And he said, "Look, let me be honest." He said, "I'm not going to trust you, and you're not going to trust me until you screw something up, and I help you through it. Then we'll understand each other." And I left, and I thought, huh, that's interesting. Well, I'll be damned, because the universe has timing on its side. We went out that night. We had a major event. It was a barricade. And I didn't close off the streets right. I didn't do something right. And I remember he showed up. He had a cup of coffee in his hand, and he just kind of watched it all unfold and kind of go to hell in a handbasket. He let it. I screwed it up. And afterwards, he came and he said, "Next time you'll think about this, you'll do this, you do this." And he gives me the rundown, and he goes, "Now hang on." And he got on the radio and he made all the bad go away. He fixed it. And he looked at me and he said, "Do we get each other now?" I said, "Yes, sir, we do." And that was it. We became the best of friends. And, you know, I really always never forgot that lesson, because trust is earned when we support each other in intimate relationships, in co-working relationships, and even, just the smaller things of passing by on the street and helping somebody. So I guess my advice to you is, have passion in everything that you do, because if you don't, life is so short. Life is so
Of course.
short. Nobody promises us tomorrow. So if what you're doing today doesn't fill you with that sense of passion and get you out of bed with a desire to do it, go do something else. And the second thing is, be vulnerable, because it we all need that, right? And look, it's the pot calling the kettle black, because I lived my life for many years without that ability to be vulnerable, and I paid the price for it on a lot of levels. And so now my new mantra for myself is to be brave and be vulnerable, and to live every day with passion.
Beautiful. So, guys, what we just heard was an amazing. I'm in loss of words over here, but there was so much of nuggets. I don't say this was golden nuggets, but this was like an absolute gold mine. Having this conversation with Sasha was such a eye opener. So we, as the first female assistant sheriff, shattering the glass ceilings, the community centric strategies, whether it is yoga, parenting, and elements that leading high risk operations. This podcast was not just a story of law enforcement. It was more about a testament of the transformative power, the power of leadership, the power of resilience, and the relentless pursuit of a safer world. Yes, she inspired me to be a leader who embodies the very essence of turning adversity into triumph. Sasha, thank you so very much for your time. Let me just stop the recording.
Thank you.